Hello again. Welcome to the Uncannery. My name is Ron. To my left, and the audio listeners anywhere, this is
Doug.
And to his left,
hey, I'm Don.
It's weird. We're in a triangle. So relative to what left means, that's very confusing.
I think it's very clear.
Okay.
A triangle is a point with two lines coming from it. One's to the left and one's to the right.
Oh, okay.
In flat plane geometry, yeah, but if you use spherical geometry or
I'm never using spherical geometry. I want you guys to know, anytime I'm talking geometry, it's never spherical.
And on the contrary, I will only use spherical geometry in every podcast that we do.
That's good. We need that covered. So I think that makes us balanced, fair and balanced. Yeah. We're a fair and balanced podcast, and we want to talk to you all today about something I've been thinking a lot about, and I'm wondering if it is something you guys think about ever. And I don't think it's actually things we usually think that much about. I wanted to ask if you guys consider yourselves reckless people.
Slightly.
I've created a chart, or I've ranked how reckless I think each of us is, from most reckless to least reckless.
Oh, wow.
And
I'm willing to bet
where do you think you
I
place?
take the top spot.
Interesting.
What's the definition of reckless?
I think reckless to me means an idiot. No, I'm just,
I also think I rank number one on that chart.
I vote Doug too.
reckless to me means someone who is willing to engage in potentially dangerous activity because they see a reward in it, and that reward is worth worth a risky behavior.
Well, so like reward, like a fireman running into a burning building, like that's a risky behavior, but the reward is that he saved somebody. Is that what you mean by reward?
I don't think that's a reward. That's like you have to do that because he's a fireman. I'm thinking like you get some sort of entertainment out of it. You feel better. Yeah, maybe there is like an actual reward. Like, oh, if I hit up this bank, I will receive the reward of money.
That is reckless behavior. Mm-hmm. And I would say I don't score that high on reckless behavior. I haven't looked at banks with that intention, unless I'm playing Grand Theft Auto. Then that's always my favorite thing to do.
But my chart goes like this. I think I'm the least reckless person here. And I think Don is the second most reckless person here. And I do think Doug is the most reckless.
What can I say?
And here's my thing. I think recklessness, in my definition, my interpretation I'm trying to present here today, has something to do with the danger, a certain, like, how comfortable are you with a certain degree of danger.
Right.
And I think I'm not at all. I don't like danger at all. I don't even want to go to Halloween Horror Nights because there's a risk that I will be afraid. And Dawn, I think you've spent a lot of time in the wilderness. You used to be outside. I think outside is a place that invites more danger than certainly inside.
Often, yes, that is the case.
So you have to learn to live in that danger zone, right?
Yeah.
And Doug,
Cue the Top Gun soundtrack.
Yep. And Doug, you, I think, are somewhat, you engage in a lot of aggressive physical activity. There's a high risk of injury and personal.
To clarify
maiming.
for the listeners, that's I practice jujitsu. So instead of, I don't go looking for bar fights, to clarify.
Not that you've told us yet. But I sometimes call you on a Saturday night and you never pick up. And, so
bar fights are only Tuesdays.
Do we agree? Do you think jujitsu is something that counts as a dangerous activity?
Inherently, yes. Even though there are ground rules to take much of that out to protect both people involved if they're rolling. Yeah, there's always risk involved. Yeah.
Would you call jujitsu an extreme sport?
I suppose. Well, because when I hear extreme sport, I think skateboarding.
Yeah.
You know, so if
the most extreme,
if it's in that realm, yeah, there's danger involved in it. I think it's a dangerous sport. Yeah.
Don, do you think like outdoor nearing? Is that what you guys call it?
No one's ever said that word before.
Yeah, if I go to Disneyland and I can't talk to an outdoor near, but would you consider yourself a mountaineer? Did you ever dabble in that?
I don't. So mountaineering usually implies like off trail trekking or like ice climbing, things like that. And no, I'm much more of a on the trail kind of a guy. Although there have been occasions where I've had to cut from one trail to another over some pretty rugged passes, but no, I wouldn't say I'm a mountaineer. Outdoorsman, I think would be that would be fair.
So there is a degree of recklessness in being an outdoorsman.
Well, see, and so I'm thinking about this word reckless because there's an element of danger, of course, but one of the primary goals of learning the skill of outdoorsneering is to reduce that danger, so that it's not a reckless behavior to go into the wilderness. It would be a reckless behavior to go into the wilderness if you had no idea what you were doing, or you didn't have the proper equipment or supplies, or you weren't prepared for what you might encounter there. But the behavior in itself is not reckless because you plan ahead in order to avoid that danger. But I was wondering about the jujitsu, the same thing, right? Like
I was thinking this too.
The practice of jujitsu, like going to jujitsu practice on Tuesday at the gym or whatever, like the intention is not that you leave there injured or having injured somebody else, but isn't the purpose of learning the jujitsu so that if there's an occasion outside of the gym that you need it, that you're ready for it, and those occasions might be more reckless than the preparing for those occasions.
I was going to say that my participation in training is because I fear a reckless occasion in which somebody does, like in a moment of self-defense, you would need to make a decision. And so I was going to say it almost becomes less reckless because the idea, I've always looked at it as preparation, potential preparation, which I think, far less reckless, I guess. It's very planned.
Would you say that somebody who comes up to you and challenges you to a fight is being reckless because they don't know how lethal your hands are?
The grappling abilities that I have. Well, that is maybe the thing that's most interesting is everyone that I train with, like we are all so adverse to fighting. Like all of us, I think, just have this unanimous agreement that, violence is awful, even though that is like what we practice.
So never having been at the gym while you're practicing, I just have this very strong image now of an octagon of some kind, and someone blows a whistle and you all just scurry to the corner and try to make yourself as small as possible. Is that how jiu-jitsu works?
Not quite. Big mat space and several one-on-one like partnerships that essentially you're going between training partners and working out 5-minute rounds, grappling each other. But I like that a lot.
But would we agree that these activities have certain inherent risks involved with them, right? Like there's a less than 0% chance that you could wind up hurt doing one of these things or invite pain upon yourself. Right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. I want to talk to today. Yeah.
What's your danger, Ron?
Very little. Absolutely nothing.
I know one.
What?
I've seen this man make some risky decisions at the Warhammer table.
Oh.
I've watched him push his troops forward far too many have been pushed forward across the halfway point of enemy lines in order to make some risky decisions to secure battle points in our miniatures war game that we play.
You've actually bring up a really good point, which is I actually do really like risk. Frequently, like when I'm playing a game, I will take the most risky decision because I think that is the most fun decision. If it gets pulled off, then that is the most exciting thing that can happen.
Yeah.
But that is a situation in which I myself as a person is in there's no risk of me.
The dangers to your poor little toy soldiers, not to you.
Yes, exactly. Right. Which is me. I would make a fantastic member of a presidential administration or something like that, where other people have to do the suffering. But what I wanted to talk about today is people who invite these kinds of risks into their lives frequently. In fact, they might even be addicted to inviting these risks into their lives. And they engage in what I think is insane activity. And I first learned about this when I found this image on the internet, a couple of years ago. I'm going to show this image to you, Doug. Would you please describe it to us and even read it for us?
Do we want to start with the image or the words?
Image first, I think.
Okay. We have a Grim Reaper who's so poorly drawn. He looks like, I believe that he's beckoning you, but it looks like he's flipping you off. We've got some divers, it appears, that are skeletons laying at what looks like the bottom of the ocean. And the words, very bold typeface, big letters, stop, prevent your death, go no farther. And then we've got some bullet points here. Fact. More than 300 divers, including open water scuba instructors, have died in caves just like this one. Fact. You need training to dive. You need cave training and cave equipment to cave dive. And cave training, cave equipment, cave dive, all underlined. Fact. Without cave training and cave equipment, divers can die here. Fact. It can happen to you. There's nothing in this cave worth dying for. Don't go beyond this point. And then there's the message is provided by a few organizations at the bottom. Very extreme. I love it.
Well, that's an uplifting message. That's nice.
This is the kind of sign that would greet you if you were recreationally diving. And I've never participated in a recreation that had to tell me you're going to die if you continue doing this.
Yeah.
And so that I think I found that very arresting. I want to talk about cave diving. Cave diving is considered an extreme sport. It's probably considered one of the most dangerous sports in the world. And every year there are about 100, slightly between 100 and 150 deaths related to cave diving. Not even just normal scuba diving. It is incredibly dangerous, and I want to know why people do it. Do you have any hypotheses? What could possibly be so alluring about... Can I describe cave diving real fast?
Sure.
Yeah. In case you're not familiar, cave diving means strapping a scuba tank, more than one scuba tank onto you, because you need... Right. Frequently, you will be under the water for 8 hours or more. So you need sometimes 4, 5 tanks of gas that are strapped to you. You will be inhaling a mixture of gases called trimix. It is not just oxygen. You need nitrogen and helium in order to get the right mixture of oxygen, because if you just had straight oxygen to your body, you would receive an effect called narcosis, which is essentially like being drunk, and you are unable to make intelligent decisions. And so you actually need to dilute the oxygen your body receives. Yeah.
You actually would get oxygen toxicity if you're breathing pure oxygen. If you have too much nitrogen, you get narcosis.
Sorry. Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So to be clear, if you're underwater for 8 hours and this is a tank, you're also taking in nitrogen and helium as well. 8 hours straight.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, and the reason why you're down in the water, you might dive to the bottom of a cave that is in excess of 500, 600, sometimes 1,000 feet deep, in some really extreme cases. And to get to the bottom of that cave, it might take 10, 15 minutes. The rest of the time you are ascending, because if you ascend too quickly, the molecules of gas in your tissues will expand too quickly and give you what is called the bends, which is incredibly painful and often results in death. So you need to very slowly ascend in order to dissipate these bubbles and avoid this very cruel and painful fate. You're also in complete darkness. There is no... there's usually a ceiling above you. You cannot just swim up in order to get out of a bad situation. You need to swim back the way you came, which means you're usually using guidelines and fixing them into walls and hoping you don't get tangled into them. There's usually silt at the bottom of these caves where if you disturb it even a little bit, you'll create these massive clouds that completely disorient you. You can start to panic, which means your breathing level will increase, which means, again, you are moving through the gas supply you've brought a lot quicker, and also creating that oxidant toxicity that Don mentioned. So you need to be incredibly calm the entire time. You have very little wiggle room to panic or make the wrong move. And if you do, you die, and your body is left at the bottom of a cave for the rest of time.
So the way you're describing this, Ron, it sounds like you think it's a bad idea.
Yes. Can I speak as the most reckless member of the group?
Yeah, I think, does this sound cool to you, Doug?
Not even slightly. Just you describing every part of this. I mean, my heart rate has been accelerating the entire time, thinking of how many variables of death there are. I despise it.
Have you ever been diving?
No, I think even the thought of scuba, you're talking to somebody who's a little bit ocean averse, though, in general. I think it's beautiful, but I've never felt more out of my element and not belonging than swimming in the ocean, I think. Yeah.
And I think that's actually like, I would like to scuba. I think I do actually like the ocean. I've been snorkeling, which I'm not trying to say is like, whoa, crazy. This guy snorkels. Right. But I have snorkeled, and both times I snorkeled, I've seen a shark, which was sick. And I thought actually pretty cool. And only the second time it might have been dangerous. It might have been a tiger shark, but it was very far away. So I do kind of understand the allure of going underwater, of seeing like a world, a thing that is usually outside of our realm of experience. I think it is neat. I have always thought the ocean is very cool. Have you ever scuba, Don? Or
I have. I am a certified advanced open water diver with nitrox training as well. So I have some knowledge about the mixture of gases. I haven't done trimix. That's more advanced than what I am. But regular recreational scubers use nitrox, which is an increased mixture of oxygen to nitrogen. So that way you reduce the nitrogen absorption.
Well, now I feel compelled that I have to go, because if this is something that fascinates you so much, I need to get over this.
Wait, I need to know your history of this. I've never known this about you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When did you get certified or whatever?
I was certified in 1997 or 8 originally. Yeah. So just something that I did for fun.
Where have you been? Like around here? Or?
Yeah. So,
Florida?
Off the coast here. And I've dived in Belize twice on 2 liveaboards. So you go for a week and can dive as much as you want. It's like 6 times a day. Also a little bit in the Caribbean. So
yeah. Are you doing reefs? Are you doing wrecks? What calls to you?
I like wrecks. I haven't sought out enough wrecks to say I'm a wreck diver. I've been on a couple, but reefs mostly, and yeah, super fun.
All right, this is good. You can keep me honest with my information then, because otherwise I might spin a lot of bull.
Right.
But never the call to cave dive, huh?
No, but my last instructor actually was a cave diver and a rebreather diver, which is another piece of equipment that you can strap on, where it's a machine basically that mixes a mixture of gases immediately for your consumption, and then captures your exhale and filters it out. So it's quieter, there's less bubbles, and you can stay down longer, things like that. But no, the thing about cave diving that I don't like is that overhead, the fact that you're trapped that way. And then, like you mentioned, the spaces that they swim into are tight. Like it's not cavern diving, like, oh, it's a big giant, underwater cathedral. It's cave diving the way like spelunking works on land, where they're squeezing through tiny spaces in order to get deep into the rock formations or the caverns. And I don't like that idea. So
same.
But some people do. Some people are absolutely crazy for it. And I really kind of wanted to explore the psychology of these people. But I think one of the stories that really got me fascinated with this hobby, I suppose, is a story of a cave diver named Dave Shaw. In 2004, Dave Shaw went to make a record dive. He wanted to swim to the deepest freshwater point that anyone had ever swum to, using a rebreather. This would have been like, I think this is like the rebreather was kind of new, and a lot of people were skeptical about its abilities, but he was a big proponent of it. So he wanted to go to the deepest point that anyone had been to with a rebreather at this time. So he went to a cave called Bushman's Hole, which is in South Africa. It is 927 feet deep, is the 3rd deepest freshwater hole in the world. The first person to reach the bottom of this hole was Nuno Gomez back in 1996.
Oh yeah, Nuno.
You don't remember Nuno?
No idea.
You don't have a poster of Nuno?
No. But just want to clarify, when we say that this hole is 942 feet deep, that means it's filled with water to the depth of 942 feet, or you have to go 942 feet into the earth and then there's a pool of water?
It's 927 feet of water. Okay. Yeah. And apparently, like, it was originally it was like 840 feet deep, and then Nuno like sonared it. It was like, actually, there's a way to go even deeper. And so,
Thanks, Nuno.
And this is another thing that frequently seems to occur with these cave divers, which is the thrill of the record, like being the first, of like pushing yourself in some other way. But I'd like to save that for later.
And also, would think it might be helpful to know, like the standard limits of recreational diving are like 100 feet. like to go deeper than 100 feet, it's a little bit more of a risk. The amount of time you can stay down there is really short on a single tank, just because the 30 feet of water is the equivalent of an additional atmosphere's worth of pressure. So at 100 feet, you're in almost 4 atmospheres of pressure. So every breath you take has 4 times as much air as it would at the surface. So you're breathing air 4 times faster. So if you're going down 900 feet, like that's crushing depth. So there's every breath you're taking is got huge volumes of air in it.
Incredibly extreme, right? 2004, Dave Shaw is swimming to the bottom of Bushman's hole in order to make this new rebreather record. He successfully does so. He touches the bottom. He can only be down there for a couple of minutes because every minute at the bottom of this hole adds approximately 1 hour of ascension time. So not a lot of time to like hang out and enjoy the scenery. He is down there. He is about to begin ascending when he turns to his left and he sees a floating body in the cave. He immediately recognizes this body as the body of Dion Dreyer. Dion Dreyer was a cave diver who died in 1994 trying to dive this exact same cave. He was 20 when he died.
And this means that he was aware that this was the last person who tried to get to dive into here, and he recognizes him as he's diving. Is that what you mean?
He just knows that Dion is a person who has dived this cave and he died. So if he sees a body, he immediately knows, oh, this has to be Dion. Yeah. It's been 10 years since Dion has been down there. And so he described the body as a wetsuit with a skeletonized face that still had goggles on, and the hands had been skeletonized, but the rest of the body seemed to be more or less intact preserved in the wetsuit. Wow. And he was just sort of floating there with his feet kind of submerged in the silt at the bottom of this cave. So
looking like the picture that you showed me, then the Grim Reaper was there too.
A little bit, yes.
Yeah.
So as Dave Shaw starts ascending, he uses a slate to send a message to the other divers, because usually you are not diving alone. You have a team. They will be posted at different depths above you, just to kind of make sure everything's fine and to pass messages along in case there were trouble or anything like that. And he passes the message to the first diver in his team, says like, Dion's down here. And when he comes up, the first thing he says is, we need to get him out of there. So it becomes Dave Shaw's kind of personal mission to return to Bushman's hole and retrieve the body of Dion Dreyer so that he can essentially return it to Dion's family and give his family a measure of peace, of restitution. That part confuses me too. If I am Dion's parents,
right,
I don't know if I need that.
Yeah.
But maybe I'm weird. I'm not a parent. I don't know if I need to see the skeletonized face of my 10-year dead son. Am I wrong on that?
Well, I don't know, but and there have been a lot of stories of people who have missing loved ones that are looking just for the closure of knowing that they've been recovered. I was just watching a TV show the other day, actually, that spoke about a mine disaster where the resolution to the fire in the mine was just to brick everybody in on the assumption that everybody had already died. And the families of the men who were bricked into the mine suffered for 50 years until they passed away themselves, knowing that their loved ones were buried there, but they didn't ever reclaim get the bodies, out so they could have so I don't know if it's so much that they needed to, I wonder if it's so much that they needed to see versus just know that he's been recovered and that, he's somehow buried in a place that they know. But
yeah, and I'm not trying to, be a jerk to these people who are clearly have suffered a lot of trauma and grief that I hope I never can understand a fraction of.
You know what you're reckless with? Insensitivity. And I won't forgive you.
All right, add that to Ron's reckless chart. I'll take it.
You just went up a notch.
Yeah.
So, and he found this body at the bottom of this 927-foot hole.
Yes. So I think that is another kind of my understanding. This is not the depth that Dion had dived to. Dion was an amateur cave diver at the time that he died, and I believe the explanation is that his tanks dragged him to the bottom. Because normally, right, there would be some buoyancy in the body, right? Is that what you're calling attention to?
Well, a lot of things. So the fact that he's wearing a wetsuit, the wetsuit is buoyant by itself. And so the only way that the wetsuit would sink is if the wetsuit is weighted down, which of course divers do wear lead weights to counteract the buoyancy of that. But as a body decomposes underwater, it does fill with gases. And so most drowning depths, the body's surface within about 3 days or so after the gases start to fill up. However, depends upon how deep he was when he drowned. So that's kind of where I'm asking my question, because if he wasn't diving super deep, he should have popped back up to the surface. So he had to have drowned, or at least made the dive to more than about 100 feet or so, because below there, the compression is working against the buoyancy of the wetsuit, and the buoyancy of his tanks would have been buoyant too, possibly. Most tanks are aluminum, and an empty aluminum scuba tank is buoyant, it will float. An empty steel tank, if it were steel, will sink. So it depends a little bit upon what his equipment was like. But as the body starts to decompose, it should fill with gases and pop back up. But also, 10 years is a long time to be under. So he did find him 900 feet deep. That's, it's 30 atmospheres worth of pressure, which causes your bones to start to dissolve. So think about the Titanic is, an even greater depth, obviously 12,000 feet, but they've never recovered any skeletons because everybody just literally dissolves into the ocean. So I'm wondering, how did this body last that long at that depth?
So I do know, I didn't write this down, but I do know that when he was diving, I believe he was at a depth of around 300 feet. So he was below. So
pretty deep.
Yeah. So he was going deep. He wasn't trying to reach the bottom. And he was with a partner. And I don't remember precisely what the nature of his accident was. And I can't answer the rest of your questions. But this is, I swear.
It's just unusual.
He was at the bottom.
It's just unusual. I know, but it's just an unusual find.
Does the fact that it's freshwater change anything?
It does, yeah.
Because there's no salinity, right? And there's the buoyancy.
The buoyancy changes, you're less buoyant in freshwater than you are in saltwater, yeah.
So back to Dave Shaw, he begins setting out and planning and gathering a team and he contacts the Dryers family and tells them, I found your son and I would like to return him. And they say, yes, please. They are all on board with this. So he begins planning what would be the deepest body recovery ever, right? And there's a South African documentary filmmaker who joins Dave for this. He's got an old buddy named Dave Shirley, who's going to kind of be his number two during this recovery. And I found a quote that I thought was very interesting. A lot of this information, I should also state, I'm getting from an article called Raising the Dead, which was posted in Outsider, an online kind of web magazine. We'll link the article in the show notes, I'm sure, in case you want to read this in a good form. So one thing Dave Shaw he was talking to a guy named Peter Herbst, a 42-year-old dive instructor, and the owner of a shop that was going to be a part of this recovery. And Peter is on record saying to Dave, I think what you're doing for the Dryers is great. And Shaw apparently looked at him, winked, and said, face it, we're doing this for the adventure of it. And I think this is kind of one of those things that I'm very interested in, is who are adventurers? What is adventure? And are they jackasses? Because I don't understand what we mean by the word adventure anymore. Right. But it just seems to me like the age of adventure is over, and there's the impulse to adventure seems to me somewhat fraught with, I don't know.
With the exception of the final frontier.
Oh, yeah. Death.
There's a step in between, which is space, but that's all right.
What do you mean the age of adventure is over?
I think when you think of age of adventure, right, I think
cartography?
Yeah, if I go in the library and I type into the database, age of adventure, I'm going to get European discovery of continents that aren't Europe, right? I'm going to get the race to the South Pole. I'm going to get Marco Polo. I'm going to get everyone who came over to North America and eventually colonized and settled it, right? And so I think in a world where we now have GPS of everything except for the moon and Mars and extraterrestrial avenues of adventure, right? There's not a lot to discover, right? Like a lot of people got really famous by being reckless and risky and taking on dangerous journeys to go to the South Pole for the first time, even though that really didn't mean a lot back then, right? Like there wasn't a lot of like study going on. I also really love polar exploration stuff, and yeah, they'll be like, oh, we mapped the route to the pole, but you look at these guys, these Amundsens and these Scotts and these who's the other one who didn't die? Anyways, Seward, I don't know. And they're all just like giant egomaniacs, right? It's about the race. It's about getting there first. It's about the record again, right? Like I want to be the man in the history book who reached the South Pole, right? And then I think they find ways that make it sound logical and appealing and not insane by saying like, oh, it's for science, or oh, it's for the betterment of mankind. Right? Am I wrong? Am I cynical? Am I being cynical? Help me.
Have you ever had an adventure, Doug?
Yes. I mean, I've always looked at adventure as, yeah, I think that there's the classical definition, which is going to be like going to foreign place, somewhere that you're not necessarily comfortable with, like that kind of outlines it. But then there's also life experience in general that kind of becomes adventure. So it kind of depends on how you define it. But yeah, there were several years as a touring musician that I felt I was very much adventuring, like the things that I hold dear about that, and all well-trod territory. But yes, very much so.
Does our imagining of adventure, is it connected to your opening question, Ron, of recklessness or danger?
Yes, 100%.
So in order to have adventure, you have to be reckless, or you have to have danger, or both?
There needs to be a degree of danger, I think, and you need to be taking what you seems like a risk. I think in adventure, like I think yes, like a vacation to a new place is a bit of an adventure, right? And I understand what is cool about that, like the new experience, putting ourselves in somewhere, like expanding our experience and our understanding of what the world is like. Oh, those are great. Those are great, cool things about adventure. And sometimes there's a little bit of danger, right? There's like, I don't speak the language. I might get robbed, or I might get a bad rate on this hotel.
I don't speak Portuguese, instantly going to be robbed. I don't speak. That's so silly.
Right. I mean, at least even if this sense of danger is usually misplaced, I feel like we frequently feel that, right? There's often a travel anxiety. I'm outside of my comfort zone kind of thing, right? Mm-hmm. Leaving the comfort zone is I think risk taking to an extent. Do we agree with that?
That's something that now I'm feeling like I am a cave diver in this element. I almost feel addicted to that. I love the feeling of going to go somewhere completely new. Yeah, like I almost experience no anxiety over it other than the excitement of like, what is the adventure going to be? So yeah, maybe this is a philosophical question.
Well, and I wonder if it's, for me, to answer the question would depend a little bit upon where I would be exercising that adventure, because some of it is simulated adventure, right, and some of it is actual, like riding a roller coaster. Like there's an element of fear and excitement, but it's safe, right? Yeah. Like you don't get on the roller coaster like, well, I hope I make it off this time. But it's simulated. And same thing I would say with travel. Like there's travel locations where, it's an adventure because I've never been there before. I don't know what the customs are. I don't know what the locality is, but it's a westernized, first world, relatively stable,
certainly
political environment. Like I know that I am safe, even though I'm going to have a steep learning curve to adapt. Versus there are places where I have traveled that are not stable in that way, and the danger is much more real than simulated. And and so I think that would alter the way I approach that a little bit. But I think there's still plenty of adventure to be had. But I think I understand what you mean about the age of adventure. Like we know where most things are on the planet, not all things, but we know where most things are. And we're not looking for stuff, but that's, I was about to ask before you brought it up, but so he dives to the bottom of this hole, he sees a body, and then he leaves it there again.
Yeah.
And now he's going to say, okay, we're going to go rescue that thing that I just left down there again. Yeah. Why didn't he just bring it up when he was there? Why leave it in the first place?
Well, let's talk about the plan. So the plan involves bagging it up. So I think the main concern is if you just bring up you see a body and you bring it up, it's going to start to fall apart, right? So you need to put it in a body bag, and you also need to tie it to a cable, which is apparently not the cables that he was going down there as his guidelines. So, and also, if you talk to, I have not spoken to cave divers. I have read people who have spoken to cave divers, and what they all the cave divers always say is you, like you were talking about earlier with jujitsu and outdoor nearing, is you always have a plan, right? You are mitigating the risks by planning and sticking to a plan. And it's the same with cave diving. They always have a very tight schedule. They know how to monitor their levels and when they should be, moving at what depth, and et cetera. And so you don't ever want to deviate from that plan. And I think pulling up a body you found would be a pretty big deviation. He's correct not to do that, right?
Yeah.
So he's got to go in and now create a new plan that does involve that.
But the wink that you're referring to seems to imply that his plan is less about providing closure for this family and more about having a second opportunity to make it to the bottom of this hole.
Yes, that is my editorial insight. The fact that he is also bringing a documentary team, I think, is sort of is evidence to that fact as well. I think a lot of these cave divers, like the reason I liken them to the Age of Exploration, is they are chasing that same thing that I think Shackleton and Scott and Amundsen are trying to chase, which is like that fame, that infamy, that look what I have done, which others cannot do or would not dare to do, right? And that, to me, is not a thing I've ever felt. I'm not a person who seeks that. And I know there are smaller ways, perhaps, in our lives where we can be that. I don't know. Were you guys ever like chasing the high score on a Pac-Man machine or something? Like
oh yeah, big time.
So maybe I'm not showboaty.
I'm not old enough to know what a Pac-Man machine is. So
that's right. You are our age.
But I would even argue with that. Like this seems a little bit more swarmy to me, because going back down to the bottom of the hole, he's not going for any greater purpose. Like you were alluding, I think, to the fact that the explorers chasing the South Pole were doing it more for their own benefit than the benefit of mankind. But I would argue that even if that's true, there was a benefit that mankind got from it in cartography and even in the skill of surviving in that type of an extreme environment, where in this case, it doesn't seem to me like there's any benefit to the greater society for the second dive other than the recovery of this person for their family, which, not that that's not important, but it seems like a smaller magnanimous move.
I agree. And I think it's part of how, I think what really fascinates me is like, what is the psychology of a person who, one, cave dives or just engages in any of these kind of dangerous, what we might call like exploratory behaviors, right? And yes, oftentimes there is a benefit to mankind, or, someone's got to be first, right? And whoever's got to be first has got to be pretty brave, right? But I do think there is a phenomenon where they frequently have to validate their decision to do this thing, which to us does seem pointless, essentially, right? Or unnecessarily reckless, right? And they say, oh, well, here's my validation. I'm going to go do this good thing, which is return Dion Dreyer to his family, which, good thing. Yes, won't argue. I won't say that's not a good thing. I wonder if it's worth the risk is the spit I'm spitting.
So thinking about the psychology of it, right? And what you started, your opening question was not your question. When I asked you to describe recklessness, you said it was to pursue a dangerous behavior in the pursuit of some kind of reward. And in the examples that we were tossing around first, our rewards were, robbing a bank, right? That you were rewarded with money, or but in the case of like these types of adventures, the reward is just an adrenaline rush, isn't it? I mean, because it's not that he's doing something that hasn't been done before. He was at the bottom of this hole already. It's not a new record to check the box for. So I wonder, because you bring up the idea of psychology, can you be addicted to adrenaline?
So I did start looking this up, right? Like, why do people engage in these kinds of risky behaviors? And I figured it would be useful to actually hear it from like an actual diver's point of view. So I did find this one interview from a cave diver named Maria Bollerup. And she is writing this article in Scuba Diver magazine, which you probably have a couple of those done. But she says, after some time, you don't know where your body ends or the water begins. This state of mind is a passageway to a deep meditative state. There are extensive studies on what happens in the mind during floating, and I recommend you look it up if you have a trauma, stress, anxiety, PTSD, or other mental challenges. Trust me on this. But floating also presents a perfect environment for developing focus and calm through visualization techniques. Every time I closed in on myself in the tank, I visualized 2 predetermined critical skills or scenarios: mentally seeing, feeling, and dealing with each situation, breathing calmly throughout each step, working patiently to still and focus the bouncing mind. And I think this answers, for me, like, she is describing this feeling of floating as being a sort of meditative act. And she says it's like a curative for anxiety and stress. And I did manage to find a dissertation by someone who was studying this kind of thing, which is like, yeah, why do people do this? This is dumb. And there is a higher propensity of divers who do have issues with anxiety. It is not just an adrenaline thing. They're like, frequently, they have some sort of problem with anxiety. This is a quote I found. The practice of high-risk sport may be a means of anxiety regulation, allowing some people to experience an emotional benefit that they do not experience elsewhere. And there was a study conducted on skydivers, which saying skydivers who had issues with anxiety, they experienced none of it while they were skydiving. And frequently, it would alleviate the symptoms of anxiety for up to an hour or 2 after the skydive. However, it was not a curative to it in the long term.
So, and I'm pretty sure if I'm in the airplane and you open the door, like, that's the moment of anxiety for me. Like, I don't think that's going to erase that for me. The person that you were quoting, the lady you were quoting originally, the quote said that she's floating in the tank.
Yeah, she was talking about practicing. In this particular instance, she's like, how do I practice for a cave dive? And she said she goes into a tank, which creates like a neutral buoyancy tank type thing.
Like a float therapy tank.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. But she said that is the way to imitate, or like the closest way to get it. When she's not actually on the dive.
But she's not talking about floating while you're diving, because what she's describing there, like, that sounds like narcosis. Like, that sounds like that disassociation from your body is not a thing you want to happen when you're 300 feet underneath the surface of the water.
But I think it partly helped me understand, like, another part where I'm afraid of all this, and I don't understand why anyone would do it, is that it's not so much the descent, but the ascent, where you are spending hours at a time, 8 hours in a dark cave with a dinky flashlight, trying to breathe correctly so you don't die. Like, I don't know if I could be alone with myself for an hour, let alone in the womb of the earth. Like, so what do you do? What happens in the brain there, right? And according to a lot of what I read, it's nothing. Like, in their head, they just focus on the task,
on breathing. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, so I don't understand the appeal.
Maybe that is partially where the meditation comes from, is because if you are focused on breathing, like every single meditation technique, it seems, I'm not going to, don't quote me on that, but it seems like all of the meditation techniques I've ever studied are always focused on breath. So I wonder if that's a part of it as well, is because you are focused on breathing, that it would be there. And I also imagine there would be almost like a superhuman quality to it, where it's like, I am existing in where this would only be natural for fish, and me as a land mammal, I'm able to conquer this in a sense, because I think that maybe is a big part of it, is the idea of how you're able to conquer something, potentially.
There's a quote that I kept seeing coming up, which is a lot of cave divers will be like, more people have been on the moon than have dove to the depths that we frequently do, right? There's a kind of like special club of like, essentially a dozen people who have dived to depths in excess of like 500 feet, right? So it is a kind of a badge of honor, right?
Dovin kind of sounds beautiful.
Dovin. I think that's like Edwardian English.
It sounds beautiful to me.
So the team is ready. In January 8th, 2005, that's when they convene at Bushman's Hole to recover Dion. Shaw is going to be the one who goes in. Dion's family, his parents even arrive to witness the recovery efforts. Shaw goes in first. He reaches the bottom in about 11 minutes. He's got a body bag with him this time, and he gets to work trying to recover Dion's body. The second person in the water is Don Shirley, Dave's close friend and another experienced diver. He's kind of just, I think sitting at a depth of, 800 feet maybe or so, just to kind of watch and make sure that everything's ready. Don recalls that as soon as he got in the water and started diving down and eventually could see Dave's light at the bottom of the cave, he realized something was wrong because the light was not moving. So it turns out that he had a quick moment to decide whether or not he should return to the surface and say something is up, or try and go deeper to see if he could possibly help. At this time, I believe Dave had already, been on the surface or the bottom of the cave for about 4 minutes or so. He decides to go down and help his friend. When he does, he shatters his, what would you call this, Don? He's got like a wristwatch that tells him his...
It's a dive computer.
Yeah. The pressure breaks his dive computer. And so he has to manually start to regulate his breathing and his gas mixture. But he does manage to make it to the bottom, and he sees that Dave has also drowned. He is not sure why, but Dave is sort of floating there at the top of the cave. Wow. So he begins ascending. He meets the next diver up eventually. He passes him a slate that says Dave is not coming up. And it now essentially becomes a rescue effort for Don Shirley, because he's not doing great either. They eventually successfully return Don to the surface. He does suffer, he does have the symptoms of the bends at some point, and he spends months kind of rehabilitating himself, going into therapy tanks in order to depressurize the bubbles of the gases in his tissues. But he does eventually recover, but he does have a kind of lifelong equilibrium problems and things like that. So
why, does it clarify, and you might be getting to this, why Dave was our central, why he died? Why did he drown?
So Dave did have a camera attached to his diving helmet when he went down, and 3 days later, Dave's body and Dion's body do return to the surface. Yeah. The thing is, both of them, Dave had managed to tie Dion to a cable. And as they started pulling it up, it had dislodged them, and they were both tied together. And once, of course, both bodies arrive, they have a camera, and of course, the first thing they do is turn it on to see what happened. Essentially what happened is Dave got to the bottom of the cave, and they had multiple scenarios in how the body retrieval would work, but apparently in all of them, they assumed Dion's body would be lodged to the silt at the bottom of the cave. This turned out actually not to be true. As soon as he began trying to bag him, he immediately became dislodged and started floating up. And so none of the scenarios were like, well, how do I actually bag a floating body? That's going to result in much more exertion on my part.
Right.
So instead of returning up and canceling the dive, as his friends say he should have, Dave tries to do it anyways, and he is trying to manipulate a floating body. The tissue is essentially, do you know the name of the actual, but like the tissue is dissolved to a consistency of soap. So it's like a buoyant.
Saponification.
Thank you very much. And according to the camera, like as you're watching this in the film, apparently the cable from his light starts to get intertwined around the body bag and himself. This becomes a giant issue again because you cannot control your light source. He is struggling to both manipulate a body and control his light. He's becoming tangled in it. He's digging up silt the whole time. It just kind of escalates from there. His breathing starts becoming irregular. He is not maintaining the breath schedule that he's supposed to. And eventually he essentially passes out from carbon dioxide and then drowns is the official prognosis. Which is which?
Cause of death.
God, thanks.
I really don't like that.
Yeah, it's terrible. Obviously, this like shatters Dreyer's parents. Dave has a wife. He has 2 adult children that he leaves behind. There's the article describes how their minister tries to deliver the news to his wife in Australia. And she's like, they're like trying to be hopeful. She's like, oh, he's been down for 5 hours, but there's still a chance. And she's just like, no, there isn't. I know what we've signed up for, kind of thing. And so, but the kind of silver lining that everyone draws from this is that he did technically succeed in the mission. The body of Dion Dreyer was returned, and it was eventually, given to the family, and they had it interred, and they found their peace. They did describe that being a thing that was of value to them and that helped ease their suffering. So again, I don't want to make light of the tragedy of the situation, but I still find this of just a very odd thing for a person to do and for a person to attempt. And again, it draws me to the psychology, right? Where it's like, especially when you have a family and you're going to engage in reckless behavior for the sake of exploration, for the sake of infamy, for the sake of the record. It's just not something I understand. I don't understand it. That's all I got to say. I don't understand
it. You mentioned it a little while ago that there's a swagger among the cave divers of how few they are, and like that they make this comparison to the men who've walked on the moon. But that's actually where my mind goes with this, is because that, like, I will dive in the ocean. I've got no problem with that. But the idea of like launching me at hundreds of thousands of miles an hour towards a tiny rock that's circling the planet, and if we miss, there's no stopping. Like, you just keep going forever. It freaks me out. But I think it's that same psychology. But again, like, I'm super thankful that those men that were involved in, and the women that were involved in the space program did those things. I'm glad that somebody signed up for that, because I can make popcorn in the microwave because of it, right? Like, it's a lot of benefits to society as a whole came out of that because they had that psychology. So yeah, it's not something that I possess, but I'm thankful that other people do. In the case of this diver, though, I'm struggling with it more because it doesn't seem to be as for all mankind type of a choice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I do feel like there are certain challenges or discoveries that like they pass a threshold of not actually being purposeful, right? Like we're going into the least inhabitable places of the earth for our species, and I suppose they would say like, exactly, right? Like how freaking cool is that? Like, right. I've pushed the limits of the human body, right, and achieved something that was thought impossible. And I guess I'm just not impressed by that. Like, I feel like there are spaces we're just not allowed in, and that's perfectly fine. Like, I don't need to know how deep Bushman's hole is, or if a person was down there. It doesn't fill me with wonder. Maybe I'm a cynic, though. I don't. Maybe there's a boy in South Africa who's like, man, that's sick. That guy went down there. I don't know. Mm-hmm. Is that what? Are we doing it for the kids?
There's definitely
kids
that.
Don't do this, by the way. PSA for listeners.
Yeah, don't cave dive. You will die. I found some. I was wondering, like, okay, the big thing for me is like, as I'm reading this story, I'm thinking about myself, which is something I do all the time, and I'm thinking like, I couldn't do that. Did you feel like you used to be more adventurous or reckless? Say like, I don't know, your teens, your 20s. Like, were there certain adventures or risks you found like easier to take? And this is a tired narrative, but as you grow older, you're like, oh, screw it. Like, what's the point? I have crossed that point now where I feel like I will not do certain things because it's like, I'm married, I'm happy, I have a stable job for the first time ever. Like, I'm good. I don't even want to like go in the desert because I'm like, what if I lose my water? It's not worth it. Like,
what I find weird is I think through getting married, stable job, those types of things, I feel like it's increased my interest in some of these things because there is the element of, okay, we know what this is going to be like kind of day in, day out. So I get more interested in some of it. Now, granted, when you say cave diving, not at all. No interest in that whatsoever. But there are other ones that I go, I probably wouldn't have done that in my 20s because I would have been busy with this. But yeah, I'd try that now. I don't know.
And I feel so as the wizened
Pac-Man remembering elder.
Exactly. Thank you.
I played a lot of Pac-Man for the record.
This is Pac-Man.
I think I would have to think a lot harder about what you're asking, but my initial response is that no, I don't feel less inclined to want to take a risk, but my body feels less inclined to be able to survive it or enjoy it.
Yeah.
Like I get tired more quickly. It takes longer to recover from things that I do. Like that's what sucks about getting older is that I don't think the desire changes, but the ability certainly starts to flag. So
I think that might be my driving energy in some of those pursuits. As interesting as that is being afraid of, if I don't keep doing this, what if I can't? Yeah, maybe that's it. I hadn't thought about that, but that's a great point.
What's the riskiest thing you're willing to do now that you have never done? So like if we were going to pool our collective funds and we were all going to fund a risky adventure for each of us, what would be your risky adventure that you'd not done before, Doug?
Oh, wow. This is going to be very, very difficult to come up with on the spot.
I can open the bank account today. We can start saving money for this.
Yeah. Wow. What would it be? I'm going to need a moment to think because adventure, I'm instantly just thinking somewhere else, right? Off the bat. So money and time are no object?
No object.
I would be fascinated to just stop the clock for a moment, immediately go to Japan, and then just like see what happens.
Join the Yakuza.
I don't think they'd have me, but yeah, knowing that I probably would be watching sumo a lot, I can see myself rubbing shoulders with a few of them. But yeah, like the thought of going to Japan, just starting and seeing how long I could be there, and then like where that would lead. Like, would that lead to a job? Would I end up doing it? Like, how much language would I acquire? That would be fascinating to me. But I think it would terrify my wife, so I don't think it'd be a very long-lived.
So your risky behavior is just existing in Japan.
Seeing, not making too. Yeah, it doesn't sound that risky when it is going without
a plan.
Prep. Yeah. And just seeing, let's see where this goes. Like, am I going to end up in the countryside?
What you want is like complete carte blanche, right? You're just like, what if I started zero in a place again? How far can I get?
To me, that's a giant adventure. I think that's the most exciting kind of adventure. I embrace the chaos of let's just see what happens. I love that. When I was touring, there was a night that we only had one night in Paris when we were there, and I knew that we were going to need to leave the next day. So I ended up just staying up all night and I just started walking. I dropped a pin on my phone. I didn't have GPS on it at the time because I didn't even have enough money to have international service on my phone. So I could just drop a pin and then walk back to it essentially. And I just stayed out all night. I ended up running into my keyboard player like 3 hours later. He had done the exact same thing, and then we went to a whole bunch of different places, and I just explored kind of aimlessly, and still one of the most memorable evenings of my entire life, just meeting different people. And it sounds instantly like it's debaucherous, and it wasn't at all. It was really just nice being able to go to different restaurants and bars and meeting people, but I really enjoyed it.
And I think what you're saying actually taps a little bit into one of my theories of why this is actually an attractive sport for certain people. So I was thinking like, okay, what kind of people cave dive, right? And I was able to find some statistics. And like, if you had to guess, like, are there any commonalities in most cave divers? Like nationality, income,
social class. I would say the income has to be in the upper levels, just because the equipment is so expensive. Plus the privilege of being able to take that risk and know that your family is not at threat because you're not coming home. Like that has to be a wealthier.
Yeah. Starting out equipment is like 30 grand, right? You got to like drop that up front, right? And so it's like most of them, like 40% of them make more than 100K a year. Like it didn't get more specific than that, which I thought was a little misleading. It's like almost like 98% of them are white. They all live in either North America, like Mexico, Australia, and South Africa, mostly because these are the places where the holes are at. I found some interesting like quotes. It's this is from a dissertation by William Oygarden. Many cave divers have similar lifestyles. They choose to live near the cave diving sites either in Florida, Georgia, Missouri, Australia, the Bahamas, or in the northern part of the Yucatan Peninsula. Once hooked, many cave divers will move their entire families to one of these locations. The areas where the caves are located are either remote or rural. Jobs are typically not high paying in these areas, and thus the family's lifestyle is limited by the local economy. Since the risk of cave diving is so great and the sensation or experience is so thrilling, the day-to-day interactions of the cave diver begins to change. Many cave divers become more direct and almost overbearing to others who do not see things their way. Unfortunately, this behavior even affects members of the cave diver's own family. Historically, cave divers have had multiple marriages or relationships or choose to stay single after multiple attempts at failed relationships. And I think there's that part I can kind of understand where it's like cave diving is an escape from like what we might call like the banality or like repetition of life that reaches a certain tempo, right? Like when you have the job, when you are married, right? Like I understand. I was talking to a friend the other day and, you know, he was telling me like, yep, I've got my schedule, you know, like I hadn't talked to him in a long time. He's like, he recently had a kid. And he was essentially, I could hear the sorrow in his voice. He was like, my day is very planned. It does not deviate. One day blends into the other, right? And I understand like the cave dive is that reclaiming, you know, something new, something novel, something exciting, something to live for. If you don't find that lifestyle enough joy in it or peace or whatever. I think I just am a guy who's made for that lifestyle though. Like I'm like, what are you talking about? Like that's fine. I'm happy to like make dinner every night.
Can I counter and ask a question that I'm curious where this leads? So because I know that you enjoy video games, when you're playing something like we'll take Skyrim as an example. Do you have many hours logged in Skyrim?
No, but I have a lot of hours in other games. Yeah.
Trying to think of like
I don't get addicted to stuff a lot. Is that where you're leading? Like
no, I'm looking for like an open world
like
RPG,
a game that simulates the sense of adventure or discovery or something like that.
Yes, yeah.
That for me is Euro Truck Simulator 2, where I discover a digital version of Europe.
Is it open world?
Yeah, I mean you're on roads, but. You can go. I could go from Vienna to Budapest in one of 7 ways. Like
there, fair enough. I just was interested. So, like with I know you're at least familiar with Skyrim. In that context, do you find yourself as a guy who's like you're looking for the main quest, but you'll take a side quest as it goes along?
Oh yeah, 100%. Yeah. I'll always take the side quest over the main quest.
So I think just based on that alone, I think it's just risk perception that gives you that feeling because you strike me as the type of person that would rather take the side route and see what would happen. I've never finished anytime that I get an open world game, I never finish it because I'm always taking the side pass. I've like, I just spent the past 30 hours hunting in the game instead of doing what I was supposed to be doing. So I wonder if it's the perception of what could potentially happen versus the...
Oh, I agree 100%. Yeah, I evaluate the risks. I'm like, if there's any, I don't care. I'm not gonna. I don't want to. I'm a very risk averse guy. I think. Well, in fields, right, of
sure
that result in pain or loss of dignity. I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe not even that.
Yeah.
I'll risk dignity. Yeah. I got that in spades.
I'm wondering about the I feel like you buried the lead here a little bit because finding out at the very end that these guys have multiple relationships. I'm wondering because there's a relationship involves obviously more than one person. So is that because of their own psychology that they are averse from commitment, or is it that the people that they are committing their relationships to can't stand the uncertainty of the risky behavior that their partner is engaging in? So yeah, I would be curious what's the source of the multiple relationships there?
So, this dissertation I wound up reading was mostly focused actually on the relationships cave divers have with their family. And so it surveyed a bunch of cave divers, was the kind of methodology it utilized. And all of them were married or in long-term relationships. And it was basically talking about like how frequently they do have unsatisfactory relationships. I also found like this interesting anecdote, which says, applying this to cave divers as relational distress increases, the stronger need for relief or escape, and the stronger need for increased participation in high-risk activity. As a fellow cave diver reflected, quote, I think that cave diving enabled me to deal with the stress of the relationship for a while until ultimately I needed to escape the duress. Right. And so it would, I think it goes a little bit both ways here, I think, to your question, Don, which is like, these are both people who are probably not super cut out for what we would consider a traditional Western married lifestyle. Right. And frequently, yes, it creates duress for the family because every weekend these guys are going out to a cave where they could shake hands with the Grim Reaper. And, that's not probably a hobby. Like, I couldn't personally do that to people who love me. Like, I need my hobbies to be less, put them through less of a ringer. But I also find it fascinating that, according to this guy, he would rather die in a submerged cave than just talk to his wife about what's wrong with their relationship, right? Like, as the duress of this relationship becomes compounding, I'd rather just
extreme.
go into the anus of the earth and sit in that. Which made me, I had to go down this route also. Is this a men thing? like most, there are female cave divers, obviously, but like most of them are men. Like, what is it about the male psyche that also is like, I'm going to go do the dangerous thing and be the first number one baby, like.
Well, the way you described that diver's understanding of how a relationship works, like it just sounds very I was going to say sophomoric, but that might sound a little bit more pejorative than I want to. But like it's the teenager, like this relationship is suffocating me because we've been together for 3 weeks, and right, that's that need to escape from anything, and it's a funny term to escape, because thinking of cave diving to me is not about escape. That's about moving into an even tighter location where there is no escape, right? In order to escape from your escape.
And it's the same with the skydiving, right? That was being measured. Like they felt less anxiety when they are technically in a place where they have fewer decisions and fewer freedom to
much more probability of death.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Right. There was another kind of thing here. A lot of these kinds of people have been linked to alexithymia, which is the inability to recognize and describe one's emotions. And so like there's a lot psychologically, I think, going on with these kinds of people. They need that high adrenaline hit of something.
You know what gives me the adrenaline hit?
Yeah.
Is talking with you guys about all this stuff.
Oh, my God, Don. You're going to make me cry.
By the next time that we talk, Ron, I want to hear about what
risk
adventure. No, I think that we need to set up an adventure for you. This has really brought it out.
This was really what I wanted. This was my cave diving cry for help. This was me telling you guys that I'm actually in a doldrum of the soul, and I, too, require to be shook free of it.
Just want to get out of here.
Thank you all for being here today. I hope we had an opportunity to explore our own psyches. I hope the listener had an opportunity to explore their psyche. If there are any cave divers out there, don't talk to me. I don't want to know that. I want to sit far away from you and just pontificate on what is going wrong with you. I don't actually care. And we hope to see you all next time on The Uncannery, where we will pop open another thick can of delicious, thought-provoking stuff. There we go.